The deadly first 7 days after death. Edgar Cayce's forbidden revelation. There exists a hidden threshold between life and eternity, a fragile span of time when the soul, newly liberated from its earthly vessel, stands at the precipice of its eternal destiny. Edgar Cayce, the famed sleeping prophet, spoke in hushed, urgent tones of this critical passage, warning that the first 7 days after death are not merely a transition, but a battleground where the fate of the soul is decided. It is here, in this veiled interval, that unseen forces converge, offering both salvation and ruin. The choices made or neglected in these fleeting moments echo through infinity, shaping the soul's journey beyond the reach of mortal comprehension. Cayce's readings, meticulously documented across decades, reveal a startling truth. The afterlife is not a passive ascent into light or descent into shadow, but an active, perilous odyssey. Ancient traditions, from the Egyptian weighing of the heart to the Tibetan Bardo Thodol, whisper of this same 7-day trial, a cosmic reckoning where the soul confronts its own reflections, its regrets, and the unseen entities that seek to claim it. The first day alone is a whirlwind of disorientation, as the soul grapples with the sudden absence of physical form, its identity unmoored, and its perceptions heightened to an almost unbearable clarity. Yet this is only the beginning. What follows in the days to come is a series of tests, some subtle, others devastating, where the soul must navigate illusions of its own making, the lingering attachments of the living, and the predatory presences that thrive in the liminal spaces between worlds. Cayce insisted that many souls, unprepared for this trial, are lured into cycles of confusion or despair, their eternal path altered by a single misstep in this fragile window. The stakes could not be higher. One must ask then, if the first 7 days are so pivotal, why do so few speak of them? The answer lies in the uncomfortable truth that mortality is not an end, but a transformation, and the choices we make in life resonate far beyond the grave. The question lingers, pressing and inescapable: what awaits you in those decisive hours? And more importantly, are you prepared to face it? The first day, between the threshold and the unknown. As the final breath escapes the body, the soul does not drift into silence. It awakens to a reality more vivid than life itself. Edgar Cayce's readings describe this initial transition as a moment of profound disorientation, where the newly freed consciousness hovers between the familiar and the unfathomable. The first day after death is not a passage into rest, but an abrupt confrontation with existence in its purest form, unfiltered by the senses, unshielded by the illusions of the physical world. Here the soul stands at the precipice of its own eternity, and what it encounters in these fleeting hours will shape the journey that follows. Historical traditions, from the Tibetan Bardo Thodol to the ancient Egyptian Book of the Dead, speak of this period as one of heightened perception, where the departed must navigate a landscape of their own memories, desires, and fears. The soul, still tethered to earthly attachments, may linger near the body, drawn by the echoes of love, regret, or unfinished business. Some report a sense of weightlessness, while others experience an overwhelming clarity, as though the veil of mortality has been lifted, revealing the threads of their life's purpose. Yet this clarity is not without its perils. The mind, unaccustomed to such boundless freedom, may recoil in terror or cling to the past, resisting the inevitable pull toward what lies ahead. Psychologically, this stage mirrors the human struggle with impermanence. The soul, now unburdened by flesh, must confront the truth of its existence, that it was never the body, nor the roles it played, but something far older, far more enduring. For some, this realization brings peace. For others, it ignites a desperate longing to return. The first day is a test of surrender, not to death, but to the unknown dimensions of being. One must ask, if this moment arrives for us all, how do we prepare? The ancients spoke of living with one foot in the eternal, cultivating a mind unshaken by the specter of endings. Cayce's warnings suggest that the soul's readiness is forged not in the afterlife, but in the choices made while still bound to earth. The first day after death is not merely a transition, it is the first step into a truth we have always carried within us. And so we are left to wonder, when the hour comes, will we recognize the freedom we have spent a lifetime seeking, or will we, like so many before us, be caught in the snare of our own resistance? The answer, perhaps, lies not in the beyond, but in the quiet spaces of our own awareness, where the eternal already whispers. The second day, the labyrinth of illusions and the soul's perilous choices. And so the second day dawns in the unseen realm, a threshold where the newly departed soul, still disoriented by the severance from flesh, now faces its most treacherous trial. Edgar Cayce's readings warn of this critical juncture, where the veil between worlds grows thin, and the unguarded spirit becomes prey to deceptions as old as human longing itself. Here, the traps are not of iron or fire, but of memory and desire, woven from the very threads of the life just abandoned. Historical accounts, from the Tibetan Bardo Thudol to the Egyptian Book of the Dead, speak in unison. This is the hour when illusions rise like mirages in a desert of the soul, each promising what the heart once craved, yet none delivering salvation. Consider the phantom feasts, where the scent of familiar meals lingers, only to dissolve upon approach, leaving the soul hungrier than before. Ancient Mesopotamian tablets describe such visions, where the dead are lured by the spectre of earthly pleasures, wealth, power, or lost love, each a snare designed to tether them to the cycle of longing. Cayce's visions deepen this warning. The soul may encounter replicas of its own past sins, replayed not as judgment but as temptation. A greedy merchant might see his hoarded gold glinting in the dark, only to find his hands passing through it like smoke. A lover betrayed may hear the voice of their deceit, calling them back into the storm of old wounds. These are not punishments, but tests, each choice to cling or release shaping the path ahead. Yet the most insidious traps are those of regret. The second day amplifies the weight of unfinished business, and here the soul may drown in the echo of words left unspoken, acts undone. Greek myths whisper of the Suke, wandering the banks of the Styx, paralyzed by the ghostly reproaches of those they wronged. Cayce's readings suggest these regrets are not mere emotions, but living entities in the astral plane, feeding on the soul's hesitation. To linger is to risk becoming ensnared in a loop of sorrow, where the past becomes a prison of one's own making. The metaphysical stakes could not be higher. Each illusion, each regret, is a crossroads. Will the soul turn toward the light of higher guidance, or will it be dragged into the shadows of its own attachments? The choice is silent, yet deafening. And so one must ask, long before the final breath, what chains do you carry that might become your undoing? What desires, what unresolved griefs, could anchor you to the storm instead of the shore? The second day does not forgive distraction. It demands clarity. Now, while the body yet draws air, reflect, release, or risk being claimed by the very ghosts you once called your own. The third day, when guiding lights clash with shadowed hands. And so arrives the third day, a threshold where the departed soul, still untethered from the weight of its former life, encounters the figures that will shape its passage. Here the veil between guidance and deception grows perilously thin. Edgar Cayce's readings speak of this moment as a crossroads, where the soul is met not by chance but by design, either by beings of radiant intention or by those who thrive in the subtle art of spiritual subversion. The guides, those luminous entities often described as ancestors, ascended masters, or angelic presences, emerge first. They do not arrive with fanfare, but with a quiet certainty, their energy resonating like a familiar melody half remembered from a dream. Their purpose is singular, to remind the soul of its divine origin, to dissolve the lingering fears that bind it to earthly sorrow. Cayce's accounts tell of souls who, upon seeing these guides, experience an instantaneous recall of their life's purpose, as though a locked door within their consciousness swings open, revealing truths long buried beneath the noise of mortal existence. Yet these guides do not force the hand. They offer only what the soul is ready to receive. Their presence a mirror reflecting the purity, or the resistance within the departed. But where light casts its glow, shadow lingers. The third day is also when the soul may encounter what Cayce warned of as the impersonators, entities that mimic the voices of loved ones, the wisdom of sages, or even the divine itself. Their skill lies not in brute deception, but in exploitation. A soul clinging to unresolved guilt may hear the whisper of a parent's disappointment, magnified into a chorus of condemnation. Another, still ensnared by material desires, might be lured by the illusion of unfinished business, a phantom promise of return. These entities do not announce their malice. They simply amplify what the soul already fears or craves, weaving a web so seamless that many stumble into it before realizing the trap has sprung. What determines the outcome? Cayce's reading suggests it is the soul's vibration, the cumulative essence of its earthly choices. A life spent in service, in love, in the pursuit of higher truth, resonates at a frequency that repels the dark while magnetizing the light. But a soul heavy with unhealed wounds, with regrets left unexamined or cruelties unrepented, becomes susceptible to the whispers of the lower realms. The third day then is not merely a test of the afterlife. It is the revelation of a life's hidden ledger, where every unspoken prayer and every ignored warning now demands reckoning. And so one must ask, who waits for you in that unseen hour? Are they the hands that will lift you toward the stars, or the shadows that will offer you one last, beautiful lie? The answer, Cayce insists, is written not in the moment of passing, but in the quiet choices of every day that precedes it. Perhaps the true terror of the third day is not the entities we meet there, but the realization that we have in life already chosen them. The fourth day, the awakening that shatters illusions. And so arrives the fourth day, a threshold where the soul stands at the precipice of its own truth. Here the veils of earthly distraction dissolve, and what remains is an unrelenting mirror, reflecting not the life one lived, but the life one chose to live. Edgar Cayce's readings speak of this moment as the great reckoning, not in judgment, but in revelation. The soul, now stripped of the body's limitations, confronts the essence of its existence, the unfulfilled promises, the buried talents, the loves neglected and the cruelties justified. For some, this awakening is a liberation, a sudden flood of clarity that propels them toward the light. For others, it is the first taste of eternal despair, the realization that they have squandered their purpose, and the weight of that truth may drag them deeper into the shadows. Historical accounts whisper of this phenomenon. The ancient Egyptians called it the weighing of the heart, though Cayce's visions suggest a far more intimate trial. Consider the case of a 19th century physician, a man of science who dismissed spirituality as superstition until his own transition. In his final hours he raged against the dying of the light, only to awaken on the fourth day to the sight of every patient he had failed, every life he had dismissed as beyond saving. The records claim he did not scream. He understood, and in that understanding he found neither absolution nor condemnation, only the inescapable consequence of his choices. Some souls, Cayce warned, cling to denial even here, weaving new illusions to avoid the truth. But the fourth day does not permit escape. It demands recognition. What then determines whether this awakening becomes a bridge to redemption or a descent into torment? The answer lies not in the grandeur of one's deeds, but in their alignment. A life spent in quiet kindness, unseen but sincere, may glow brighter in this moment than 1,000 hollow triumphs. Conversely, the soul that chased power at the expense of compassion will find its achievements crumble like dust in its hands. The fourth day does not ask what you had, it asks what you gave. And so we must pause and ask ourselves, if this moment came upon us now, what would the mirror reveal? Would we stand in the radiance of a life well spent, or shrink from the shadows of our own making? The fourth day is not a future to fear, but a truth to prepare for, a truth that begins in the choices we make today. The fifth day, the crossroads of eternal choice. And so arrives the fifth day, a threshold where the soul stands before the great ledger of its own making. Here the scales of destiny tremble, for this is the hour when free will, that sacred and unyielding force, asserts its final dominance over the afterlife's unfolding path. Edgar Cayce's readings speak of this moment as the judgment of the self, not by some external arbiter, but by the soul's own reckoning, where every choice, every intention, every unspoken desire is laid bare before the mirror of eternity. The landscape here is neither heaven nor hell, but a liminal realm where the weight of one's earthly decisions manifests as tangible forces, pulling the soul toward light or shadow, ascension or descent. Historical mystics, from the Egyptian weighing of the heart to the Tibetan Bardo Thurdle, describe this juncture as a test of clarity. The soul is presented with illusions, echoes of its past attachments, its unresolved fears, its deepest regrets. Some see the faces of those they wronged, while others see the phantom of roads not taken. But the deception lies not in the visions themselves, but in the soul's response. Will it cling to old grievances, repeating the cycles of suffering, or will it release them, stepping unburdened toward the higher realms? Cayce warned that many souls, even those who lived virtuously, falter here, mistaking familiarity for truth, comfort for growth. The fifth day does not punish, it reveals. And in that revelation, the soul chooses its fate. Yet this is also the day of grace, where the universe extends a final invitation. What will you carry forward? The spiritual landscape shifts in response. A soul that surrenders its ego may find the path ahead illuminated by guides unseen, their presence a whisper of divine mercy. But one that hardens in defiance will feel the ground beneath it darken, the air grow thick with the weight of its own resistance. The choice is never between good and evil alone. It is between evolution and stagnation, between the courage to transcend and the fear to remain. Consider then the choices you make now. Each decision, no matter how small, is a rehearsal for this moment. The fifth day does not invent the soul's destiny. It merely unmasks what was always there. And so one must ask, when your hour comes, will you recognize the crossroads for what it is? Or will you mistake the echo of your past for the only voice worth following? The answer, as Cayce insisted, is written not in the stars but in the quiet chambers of your own heart. As the sixth day dawns in the unseen realms, the soul stands at a crossroads where the company it keeps will either elevate its ascent or bind it to unseen perils. Edgar Cayce's readings speak of this pivotal moment with solemn urgency. Here, the departed do not walk alone. They are met by fellow travelers, beings who may appear as guides, lost kin, or even deceptive phantoms cloaked in familiarity. The nature of these encounters is not mere chance. It is a test of discernment, where the soul's own resonance determines whether it is drawn toward light or lured into shadow. The allies of ascension often manifest as luminous figures, ancestors who have traversed the same trials, spiritual mentors from past lives, or even strangers whose souls vibrate with divine purpose. Cayce's accounts describe these beings as emanating a warmth that dissolves fear, their presence a silent affirmation of the soul's worthiness. They do not speak in words but in sensations, a memory of love, a whisper of truth, a sudden clarity that cuts through the fog of transition. Yet their greatest gift is not comfort, but choice. They offer the soul a mirror, reflecting its own readiness to rise. Those who accept their silent counsel find their path illuminated, their burdens lightened as if by unseen hands. But the sixth day is also a hunting ground for those who prey on uncertainty. Cayce warned of entities that mimic beloved voices or wear the faces of the living, exploiting the soul's lingering attachments. These are not demons in the fire and brimstone sense, but fragments of unresolved energy, souls who, in their own transitions, became ensnared by regret or vengeance. They do not seek to torment, but to anchor, to pull the newly departed into their own cycles of repetition, where time loses meaning and growth stagnates. The deception is subtle, a mother's voice calling from the mist, a lover's touch that feels achingly real. The soul must ask, does this presence demand my stagnation, or does it honor my becoming? The weight of these encounters cannot be overstated. Just as a traveler in a foreign land relies on the wisdom of trusted companions, the soul in transition is shaped by the vibrations it chooses to align with. Cayce's readings suggest that the bonds formed in life echo here. Those who cultivated discernment, who loved without possession, who sought truth over illusion, find themselves surrounded by allies of light. But those who clung to control, to unhealed wounds, or to the illusion of separation, may mistake chains for lifelines. Let this truth settle into your bones. The relationships you nurture now are the spiritual alliances that will either steady or sway you in the hour of passage. Who do you walk with in this life? Who reflects your highest self, and who dims your light? The sixth day is not a future to fear, but a revelation to prepare for, one that begins with the choices you make today. And so arrives the seventh day, the hour of reckoning, when the soul stands bare before the cosmic ledger of its existence. Here in this final threshold, the echoes of every deed, every whispered intention, and every unspoken regret coalesce into an unyielding mirror. Edgar Cayce's readings speak of this moment, not as a punishment, but as an inevitable confrontation with truth, a truth so luminous it dissolves all illusion. The ancient Egyptians called it the weighing of the heart, the Tibetans the judgment of the dead, and in the hidden scrolls of the Essenes, it is the day of the great accounting. Yet across all traditions, the essence remains the same. What was sown in life is now harvested in eternity. The soul does not face a wrathful arbiter, but rather the immutable law of cause and effect. Cayce described this as a vibrational alignment, where the soul's essence is measured against the harmonic frequencies of its own choices. Did it cultivate love, or did it hoard bitterness? Did it seek understanding, or did it wield judgment? The records are not kept by some celestial bureaucrat, but by the soul itself, etched into the akashic fabric of its being. And here, in this sacred silence, there is no escape from accountability. The allies met on the sixth day, whether guides or tempters, now step back, for this evaluation is solitary. The soul must answer not to a god, but to the highest version of itself. The history whispers of those who faltered at this crossroads. The Roman Emperor Julian, in his final moments, is said to have cried out in despair, as his life's ambitions crumbled under the weight of their consequences. The mystic Jacob Boehme, in his visions, wrote of souls who, upon seeing their own reflection in the divine light, dissolved into tears, not of fear, but of profound recognition. For some, this moment is redemption. For others, a descent into cycles of repetition, bound to earthly lessons until the debt is paid. But what of those who pass this trial? Cayce's readings suggest they are not merely judged, they are released. Like a river merging into the ocean, they transcend the limitations of their past, stepping into realms where time and suffering hold no dominion. Yet the warning remains, the seventh day does not forgive unpreparedness. The traps laid in the earlier days, distraction, denial, the siren call of unfinished attachments, now reveal their true cost. And so one must ask, if this moment arrives for all, what are you cultivating now? The ledger is not sealed at death. It is written in every choice, every act of courage or cowardice, every extension of grace or grasp of greed. The seventh day is not a distant myth. It is the shadow of your own becoming. Will you meet it with dread, or with the quiet confidence of a life well examined? The hour approaches, not just for the departed, but for the living. For in truth, the judgment begins long before the final breath. And so the seventh day dawns, not with the blinding light of revelation, but with the quiet, inexorable weight of cosmic judgment. The soul, now stripped of earthly illusions, stands before the threshold of its next existence, its path no longer dictated by chance, but by the immutable laws of spiritual consequence. Edgar Cayce's readings speak of this moment as the Great Reckoning, where the ledger of a life is not merely tallied but felt, where every unspoken word, every deferred kindness, every shadow of intention rises to meet the soul in a silence more profound than death itself. Here, the universe does not ask what one believed, but what one became. And it is in this crucible that the soul's true direction is revealed. For some, the verdict is ascent, a gradual unfolding into realms of light, where the vibrations of love and wisdom resonate as tangible forces. These souls, Cayce suggested, are not merely rewarded but prepared, their consciousness expanded to receive truth so vast that human language fractures under their weight. Yet even this ascent is not uniform. There are layers, spheres of learning, where the soul must dissolve the last vestiges of ego before merging with the divine. Others describe it as a homecoming, a return to a state of knowing that predates creation itself. But make no mistake, this is not the passive heaven of earthly dogma. It is an active, evolving state of being, where growth never ceases, and the soul's work is only beginning. Yet not all paths lead upward. The readings warn of those who, burdened by unresolved attachments, unfinished vengeance, clinging desires, or the gravitational pull of earthly trauma, find themselves drawn back, not by choice, but by the unbreakable chains of their own making. Some linger in the borderlands, the so-called earthbound realms, where time distorts and the soul replays its unresolved dramas like a broken record. Others are pulled into the cycle of rebirth, not as punishment, but as necessity, for the lessons they refuse to learn must be faced again in flesh and blood. Cayce's visions describe this not with condemnation, but with a sorrowful inevitability. The universe will not be denied its balance. And then there are the rarer, darker paths, the ones whispered of in the deepest layers of the readings. Souls who through willful cruelty or spiritual blindness have so distorted their essence that they are drawn to realms of discord, where the vibrations of fear and separation harden into something akin to a self-made prison. These are not the cartoonish hells of fire and brimstone, but something far more terrible. A state of existence where the soul, cut off from love, must endure the echo of its own choices until it awakens or dissolves. What awaits you? The question lingers, not as a threat, but as an invitation. For if Cayce's revelations teach us anything, it is that the afterlife is not a destination, but a mirror, a reflection of the life we cultivated in the unseen moments, the choices we made when no one was watching. The 7 days are but a prelude. The real journey begins when the soul at last sees itself as it truly is. And so one must ask, when your time comes, will you ascend, or will you be pulled back? Will you dissolve into light, or will you carry your shadows into the next life? The answer, dear seeker, is being written now. And so the veil lifts, if only for a moment, revealing the fragile threshold between this world and what lies beyond. The 7 days that follow the final breath are not merely a passage, but a crucible, where the soul stands unshielded before forces unseen, its destiny balanced upon the choices made in life and the clarity or confusion of its final transition. Edgar Cayce's revelations do not offer comfort in certainty, but rather a solemn warning that the afterlife is not a passive ascent into light, but an active, perilous journey where the unprepared may falter, where the unexamined life risks eternal consequence. One must ask then, what remains when the body falls away? Is it the weight of unspoken words, the echoes of deeds left undone, or the quiet resonance of a heart that never fully awakened to its own potential? The paths diverge sharply. Some souls, lightened by love and wisdom, rise as though drawn by an unseen hand toward realms of higher learning. Others, tangled in the remnants of earthly attachments, grudges, regrets, or the seductive pull of unfinished desires, find themselves ensnared, pulled back into the cycle, or worse, adrift in the shadows of their own making. Cayce's visions suggest that the universe is not indifferent to our struggles. It is in fact a mirror, reflecting back to us the truth of what we have cultivated within. Yet this is not a tale meant to inspire fear alone, but profound introspection. For if the first 7 days are a test, then life itself is the preparation. Every act of kindness, every moment of forgiveness, every conscious step toward understanding is not merely moral, it is strategic. A fortification of the soul against the storms that await. The question lingers, how does one live in such a way that when the hour comes, the transition is not a stumble into darkness, but a deliberate step into the light? Let this be the invitation, then, not to dread the unknown, but to engage with it, to sit in the quiet and ask, what would my soul carry with it if I were to cross that threshold tomorrow? Would it be the weight of distraction, or the wings of wisdom? The mystery of death is not meant to be solved, but to be walked toward with eyes open, heart prepared. For in the end, the journey does not belong to the dead alone. It is a shared pilgrimage, a collective awakening, and perhaps, in the act of questioning, of seeking, of striving to live with intention, we do more than prepare for our own passing. We illuminate the path for those who walk beside us, both in this life and the next.